This is Cities Skylines. It's a city builder. Well, actually, I would go as far as saying that it's the city builder. With City Skylines 2 announced, I thought now would be a good time, and potentially the last time, to get in a review of this OG classic. Before we get into it, please consider subscribing. I'm trying to build up my channel, and each sub really helps. City Skylines is the ultimate sandbox city builder. You're really given a clean slate and some very minor progression points, and you're left to build a city, as dysfunctional as you'd like it to be. Much like other Paradox games, the emphasis is on the sandbox. There is very little in the way of progression, especially for experienced players. You do unlock more things as you progress in a playthrough, but the default play mode is easy enough that you can probably unlock everything just in a few attempts. Anyone can make a big city, but the long-term fun in the game comes from making a good big city, and even one that's nice to look at. Because pretty quickly the traffic starts to pile up, but we'll get to that. The game really does everything in its power to not get in your way. You can sculpt terrain, intertwine roads like spaghetti, and completely crash your economy with a single slider. The skyline's the limit. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that City Skylines is a weird combination between a casual city builder and a nerdy mega colony sim. See, you can get really far into the game by just plonking down houses and roads, but underneath the surface there's a lot of stuff to optimize. It's a lot like other Paradox games in this regard, and I think it's by design choice. Low barrier to entry, but high skill ceiling. And because it's such a sandbox, it's really what you make of it. I've spent hours designing really optimal cities, only for my next one to be, how cozy can I make these cul-de-sacs? The traffic is your first, biggest, and pretty much only threat in the game, besides the odd poo water incident or expanding too quick in the early game. See, the people living in your city are dumb as nails. They go to work, they go to the shops, and they go home. And they pick the fastest route to get to and fro. But so do the other million people living in your city. So the game becomes about managing how they get around. Road management can only go so far, and so creating good public transit becomes essential. Usually what happens in my playthroughs is that I just expand like crazy, manage the traffic for a bit, and then build, and sort of rinse and repeat. The other management elements of the game, aka having enough hospitals, police, etc., are really easy to manage. You kind of just place them and forget about them, but their placement with regards to the traffic is kind of important, because if they have to travel far, then they can end up creating traffic too. Money is something that you have to manage, but I kind of just forget about this after a while. It starts to pile up and then stops being an issue outside of the first 20 minutes of a playthrough. There is a lot you can do to manage your money in the finances tab, but again, you sort of just fire and forget about these. Once I have enough cash, I just slam these onto the high setting. Oh, and taxes at 12%. Why? Well, 12 is just the magic number of compliance. The one thing I love about the game is that there is a lot going on under the hood. It might not seem like it, but each worker living in your city is being simulated. Each one does a little calculation to see if it's worth driving to work today, or if they're going to walk and take public transport. At some point in the day, they'll probably want to visit the shops, like good little consumers, for things like food. But food isn't a resource that you have to manage, because we live in a free market capitalist utopia, so food can just be imported from off-map if there aren't any local factories. And then traffic is made depending on where the stuff is coming from. I've never tried it, but I think if you build a zero-industry city, all your highways will get clogged as everyone tries to order Uber Eats from like 2 cities over. Paradox always strikes this balance so well. You're not entirely in control of your city, just like a real-life government. All you can do is encourage certain behaviors with certain actions. You can't force people to take the bus, but damn, free bus tickets are certainly persuasive. So as great as the free play mode is, I do feel like there was a missed opportunity for scenarios. I love the old Zoo and other Tycoon games, and a big part of that was the different scenarios that gradually got harder and harder, but also taught you about more advanced mechanics in the game. I think Cities Skylines could have really benefited from something like this, but I don't know if it's Paradox's style. Now, you're probably saying, but Admiral, they do have scenarios in Cities Skylines. It's just in the other tab that no one clicks on. And to that I say, oh, they do. Huh. There are a handful of these, but they're really not great. They seem like an afterthought, especially since you only get them with some of the DLC. I think there could have been a cool set of scenarios that gradually teaches things like managing traffic, but Paradox just aren't really great at making tutorials. However, we do live in an age where everyone can just find YouTube guides. Talking about the DLCs, Cities Skylines might be Paradox's worst offender when it comes to extra shit you can buy. It's almost as bad as The Sims. I don't mind the bigger DLCs that add a lot of content, but what on earth are these? In-game radio music? Paying for music in a game seems so archaic in a day and age where you can get all your music for free on Spotify. Like, who's buying these? The content creator packs make sense. The game has a huge modding community, so it's good to stoke that a bit and reward some of the more dedicated creators. but there is so little in each pack that it makes them all seem a bit silly. Even some of the main DLC don't seem to be all that well implemented either. I remember trying the Industries pack for the first time and being kind of unimpressed and a little confused. It doesn't replace the old Industries, it just adds specific kinds that have to be built within pre-designated areas. But this was sort of in the game already, but now it's more advanced. But the old system is still there too. I have to give credit where credit is due. The DLCs are at least conducive to the overall experience of the game. Some of the funnest parts of City Skylines is designing small parts of your city, and the DLCs really let you do that by zooming in on specific sections like parks, industries, campuses, etc. I guess I've just really grown tired of Paradox/EA's way of selling games. The base game is fun, but lacks content, but you can flesh it out for $10 at a time. Oh, and it's extra for cup holders and radio. I guess it's kept the game relevant for 8 years. Perhaps my biggest gripe with the whole game is its obsession with grids. The game encourages you to build in grids because it's the optimal use of space, all your buildings are square, and everything snaps and lines up nicely. This is fine, but as soon as you try and create cities that aren't completely grid-shaped, which I believe is most cities in the world, you run into the issue of the buildings looking out of place or just not fitting. Hopefully in Cities Skylines 2 they'll make the buildings more dynamic with different shapes and such. Trying to build my organically shaped city while trying to squeeze in large rectangles is kind of demotivating. Oh, and all the buildings have to be completely flat, which leads to this weird terrain bending nonsense. Even the pastures and tree nurseries in the farms have to be perfectly rectangular. It's honestly bizarre. You have to build in a grid if you want to play optimally, but then again, playing the game optimally is kind of a bit silly, because it's a sandbox. You can just decide what you want your city to be like. I decided that all of mine are going to be dystopian traffic jam hellscapes, with balloon tours, of course. It's kind of funny to me that everything is grid-based except for the zone designation tools. I've had to master drawing straight lines with this thing because I just want square parks and districts. Cities Skylines is one of those games that you can sink a lot of time into. It's infinitely replayable and I've had a lot of fun coming up with ideas for cool cities and then building them. I've made eco-cities, big cities, small cities, optimal cities, round cities, and I've still got ideas to go. And that really is the beauty of a game like this. Player agency is what drives the fun. Games like this stay relevant for so long because it's up to the player to find the fun in the experience, which can be kind of infinite. The downside to this is that you can feel a bit directionless at times, which is usually the reason I stop playing the game. But given enough time, I always come back to reinstall to build one more traffic jammed intersection. Needless to say, I'm looking forward to the sequel. Thanks for watching.